Welcome to Watching Comics with me, Chris Otto, where I share my thoughts and opinions on comic book movies and television shows. And on this week's episode of Watching Comics, I'll be talking about the Netflix original series, Daredevil. Daredevil was a character that I had always wanted to get into, and I remember being really excited before the movie came out in 2003 because it was a character that I had an interest in, but I wasn't sure where to start. I didn't know much about him, so I figured instead of trying to get into the comics, it'd be cool to just see the movie, get an idea of who the character was, and then go into the comics. I feel like I kind of did the same thing with the X-Men and Spider-Man. Even though I watched cartoons of them as a kid, seeing the movies when I was a little bit older got me interested in the characters again. Unfortunately, the movie came out was horrendous, so I never became interested in Daredevil. But when Marvel Studios decided that as part of their Marvel Cinematic Universe that they would have Netflix television series, I was excited when Daredevil was announced as one of those shows. I was also excited because as much as I love the Marvel movies and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I was excited to see shows that would look more at the street level heroes. I know that was kind of the original idea for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but they've included, especially in this second season, a lot more supernatural, superpowered characters. So I was very excited that Marvel was going to have on Netflix shows that were more about the street level heroes. And it was announced that Daredevil would be the first, and that he would basically be cleaning up Hell's Kitchen after the events of the Avengers. It was going to be cool to see the effect the events of the Avengers had on just normal everyday people in the streets of New York City. So I was excited to see that. And then I got excited when Charlie Cox was announced as Matt Murdock because I loved him on Boardwalk Empire. He was a really cool character in that, and I thought his performance was great in Boardwalk Empire. So I was excited to see him take on Matt Murdock. And then the show came out like 3 o'clock in the morning. So I watched just the first episode before I went to bed. Like I said, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was great. And I loved that it was at street level. And I loved how, since it was on Netflix, they could kind of push the limits on what they could do. With Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on ABC, there's only so many things you can show and say. So it's very much more family friendly, which is in with the theme of the entire cinematic universe, which is much more family friendly because they know that kids want to see these heroes. So you can't have out of control blood and violence and cursing in these movies when you are trying to attract a younger audience. With Netflix, on the other hand, they were willing to push the limits. They're not, it's not like they were cursing out of control, but there was more cursing than you would normally hear in a Marvel film. And there was a lot of blood. Matt Murdock got the shit kicked out of him in almost every fight he was in the show. So it was really cool to see that, like this visceral look to a character, because we're used to seeing characters like Captain America and Thor and Iron Man, and most people can't stand a chance against these characters. If Captain America wanted to stop a purse snatcher, it would be no problem for him. The toughest fights are when they're fighting either an army of alien soldiers or someone that has a superpower. So it's cool to see a human in just some black tights getting, beaten pretty bad by like a regular thug. So it it was so different from anything we've ever seen in the Marvel Universe, which I absolutely loved and gives me hope for the series that have already been announced. What Jessica Jones and what's the other one? Can't remember his name. Luke Cage, I think, is getting a show. Um, I think Iron Fist is getting a show. So I'm looking forward to those shows. And I also, a couple hours ago before recording this, saw an article where Charlie Cox would love, since Daredevil has been greenlit for season two, he would love for season two to introduce Elektra and a character that I would love to see, the Punisher. Because that was my first reaction after seeing the first episode of Daredevil is, all right, this is awesome. When are they getting to the Punisher? Because for those of you listening, I believe I have mentioned in the episode where I talked about the Marvel Cinematic Universe my concerns that a character like the Punisher may not fit in with the cinematic universe that Marvel has put together because of how family friendly it was. But after seeing this show, Daredevil, and how violent it was and how not family friendly it was, it gives me hope that they can introduce the Punisher in this universe, because there were times I'd be watching this show and I'd forget that it's supposed to be the same world as Iron Man and Captain America because it's so different from that feeling. And the show as a whole, I loved. I thought, again, like I said, I loved Charlie Cox in Boardwalk, so it was great to see him as Matt Murdock. I think he did a great job playing the character. I thought his performance was really good. And I think the real standout performance in the show was Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. And that's part of what I also liked about the show is that not only did you, since it was a 13 episode show instead of a movie, it didn't feel like there are movies, you know, Batman Returns, that focus so much on the villains, the hero gets no time at all. So what I liked about this being a show is that every once in a while you could have an episode that was maybe more Wilson Fisk centric so that you could get a very fleshed out origin story for the villain as well as the hero. So, and I've always thought that TV is the better medium for that type of comic book character. Obviously, the budget on TV can't always keep up with the more powerful characters, you know, like Superman. Well, Superman's had plenty of live action TV shows, but character like Iron Man or a character like Thor, it would be hard and expensive to, especially today, to have a show about that character week after week. Comic book shows would end up being on channels like HBO or Showtime. So then it becomes you're paying to see these shows, and that's not what, you know, Marvel wants. They want to give it to people in a more accessible way. So obviously the more accessible way is movies, but I think comic books in general, since they are episodic, month by month you get a new issue, they kind of lend themselves more to a TV show. So that's also why I was very excited about seeing Netflix TV shows, because it allows you to tell one big story with 13 little stories. So instead of only worrying about, you know, he's worried about Wilson Fisk, but at the same time, he gets to solve these other small crimes. So you're not only seeing him deal with one problem, you're seeing him deal with lots of little problems. You get to see him use all of his skills, and then it builds up to him taking on Wilson Fisk. But like I said, I thought Vincent D'Onofrio was amazing as Wilson Fisk. And one of the things that bugged me at first, but then really grew on me, was how, like, awkward and shy almost the character of Wilson Fisk was being played. like I said, I never really got into Daredevil comics, so I think I've read maybe one comic that featured the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, in it. So I don't know if that's his normal way of acting, but it was so different to see this character. You know, he's supposed to be Kingpin. He's supposed to be this crime lord, this guy who's in charge of the Hand, you know, a ninja clan. He's supposed to be in charge of the entire city, you know, or at least the criminal underground of this city. And to see him being so awkward and everything, it was different, but I think that's why I liked it so much, because he was trying to be as behind the scenes as possible. And then obviously Daredevil and his friends, you know, the newspaper guy and you know, Foggy, they them all working together, it became it necessitated Wilson Fisk coming out into the light. But he was still very awkward, and I think part of that is because he was trying to hold back that very violent side of him, because that's something I also always liked about Kingpin, is that he's this big guy, and it's not just that he's big, it's that like he's fat, so you wouldn't expect him to be as physical as he is, but Kingpin can beat the shit out of anyone any day of the week. So it's cool to get to see Vincent D'Onofrio play Wilson Fisk when he went off the rails and started, you know, killing people. That was always exciting to see. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a second season and seeing where the character of Kingpin goes. See him become Kingpin. Um, there was also a ton of Easter eggs in the show that I didn't get all of them because, like I said, this is really my first good introduction to Daredevil. But that one thing that I found interesting that is an Easter egg for people that know the characters, and for me wasn't just an Easter egg, just something interesting to think about, was the character of Madame Gao. She was an interesting character because at first you think she's just this old Chinese woman that doesn't speak any English, and then it turns out she speaks English perfectly fine. She also speaks Mandarin or whatever version of Chinese she speaks perfectly fine. She admits she speaks many languages perfectly fine. You see that her and the character of Leland, the accountant, are kind of in cahoots, and while he's talking to her, she just kind of disappears. He turns away, he looks back, and she disappears. And I'm like, holy shit, she's an alien or not. She's definitely not human. So I decided to look up the character, and I saw that she is, I forget specifically what, but she is this race of Asian people that like live in like a secret city in like a pocket dimension in the Himalayas or something. I don't know, but she's not human is basically the idea. So it was cool that even though it was a show focused on the street level, no superpowers characters, it was cool that to kind of keep it in the back of your head that superpowers do exist in this world, they have this one character that shows that she does have some type of power, which is something else I'd also look forward to in future shows and future seasons of Daredevil, is seeing them introduce, you know, powers to these characters. How would Daredevil react to these characters? And I think there's already plans for the team up, the Defenders or something, with Daredevil, and Iron Fist, and whoever else that they plan on giving shows to on Netflix. Like I said, I really enjoyed the show. I know I've seen online people complaining about the writing, and there were times where the dialogue seemed awkward. There were a few times where it, like I said, as much as I liked Vincent D'Onofrio's portrayal of Wilson Fisk, there were times where I felt like he was taking the social awkwardness too far. Sometimes Foggy delivered lines a little awkwardly. The news reporter, there were times where he was kind of over the top, I think, but for the most part, I thought the show had good writing, good performances, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more of Daredevil and what Marvel has in store for these shows on Netflix. Like I said, they already have plans for like I think 3 or 4 other shows. Like I said, I'd love to see a Punisher show. I know there was talk of a Punisher show, but I don't think that specific Punisher show is going to happen. So I'd love to see the Punisher in this Marvel Cinematic Universe. I also liked the design of Daredevil's uniform. Throughout the show, he's just wearing black, but he has, Rosario Dawson's character keeps telling him he should wear armor, this and that. And then finally, at the end, he has the red outfit with the horns and everything. And I liked the way it looked. I think that's one of the cool things about a character like Daredevil that wears armor like that, similar to what they did with Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy. You're not just gonna put a guy in red spandex. That wouldn't work in real life. So I thought it was cool that plot wise it turned out that Wilson Fisk has been wearing suits that is lined with this bulletproof Kevlar, like a lightweight Kevlar. So Daredevil Matt Murdock finds out who makes Wilson Fisk's suits and has this guy make a suit for him. And then that's a great fight in the last episode. Matt Murdock and Foggy think they've put Wilson Fisk away and he manages to escape. But then Daredevil manages to corner Wilson Fisk and they get into a pretty brutal fight in an alleyway. Daredevil introduces his sticks that he beats you with. No ropes attached to him though, so I wonder if they'll introduce that in the second season. Throwing it and wrapping around a gargoyle so he can swing from building to building. That would be fun to see. But yeah, it was a heck of a fight between Wilson Fisk and Daredevil, especially now that Daredevil was in his, devil suit with the horns and everything. And like I said, it was cool to see Kingpin, he could be socially awkward and then just all out beat the shit out of someone. We saw him kill, like 3 or 4 different people. That was another thing that really stood out to me. Every episode, the fighting stunts were unbelievable. Some of the moves got repetitive because Daredevil did the same, like, spinning backflip in literally every fight. He did the same move, but it was a badass move, so I'm not surprised that they put it in every single fight. But yeah, the fight scenes were great. A fight scene that really stands out to me was in one of the early episodes, maybe the second or third episode, where Daredevil is fighting the Russians in a hallway to save a kid who has been kidnapped. And the whole fight is shot in one take, or at least it looks like it's in one take. Obviously, there's editing magic you can do to make multiple takes look like one take, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was all in one take. That was a really cool fight scene. It's anything that's done in one take is cool. So when you do a fight scene in one take, one long shot, it's really awesome. Just like that fight scene in Old Boy with the hammer when he's killing all those guys with the hammer and it's all one long take of him fighting those guys. It reminded me of that. It's just Daredevil going up and down this hallway into a room, throwing guys out of the room. The door falls over. They're smashing through the door. and then he goes into the room, grabs the kid, and walks out. And again, Daredevil is exhausted and is bleeding all over the place, but walks out with the kid. And that's another thing that I've seen people commend the show for, showing the hero. He gets into a fight, and at the end of the fight, he's exhausted and bleeding, because you hardly ever see that in movies. The hero is always, he's never short of breath, unless for dramatic reasons they need him to be short of breath. So it was cool to see Daredevil so vulnerable, because like I said, he didn't have any armor on him until he had that red suit. So he was constantly getting sliced and stabbed, and he's lucky to have survived the season. But yeah, I really enjoyed this show. I'm looking forward to more Daredevil and more shows. I feel like I keep saying that, but it's true. I'm really excited to see what else Marvel has in store for these Netflix original series. And that just about wraps things up. As usual, if you think my opinions are stupid and wrong, or if you think I left something out that I should have mentioned, let me know. Facebook.com/watchingcomics or on Twitter @watching_comics. Thanks for listening. I'm Chris Otto, and I'll see you next time.